Hey, this is Chase Hughes. You are watching the Break It Down show.
And right on cue, there's an airplane flying in over the backyard into John Wayne Airport because they always make a lot of noise. This guy's not on it though; he's kind of coasting, so we'll let him slide. Hey, I dig it. We're here. Turns out we know a couple of the same people. We got connected to you from Frank Agan, but you also know a good friend of mine, and you know Hunley. You've been on a show on his panel of for behavior people.
Yeah.
Eric Henley is a good friend, and it was funny to see you there and getting around and doing the prep for the show. I mean, we could talk veteran stuff all day, but I just think it's cool that that's not even really a part of what you promote and talk about in terms of your day-to-day work. Yes, you're founded in that stuff, but I'm forced to always let guests know because it's so relevant that like I was a spy in combat zones and I've seen these things and they apply. I have to always say that, right? Because it's relevant to what I do. And even though it's relevant to what you do, you've managed to really escape that. How in the heck did you pull that off?
I don't know. I guess, I would never call myself a spy, but I spent a lot of my time in my career doing sneaky stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that I spent my last 10 years in the military building up my reputation because I thought obscurity would be my biggest enemy. So I spent a long time trying to just push content out there and make people aware before I retired.
Yeah, the obscurity problem. I suffer from that, because I was really good at what I did. And so commanders pushed me out further into their trouble spots. And so I know warlords. I know all kinds of government officials from these war-torn countries, but I didn't get to spend time at the Perfume Palace, and that's an actual place for the audience. I didn't get to spend time with those other things, and so I know a lot of people that live in conflict zones, but I don't know a lot of folks in the corporate world, and so it was really tough. I'd knock on the door, and they wouldn't even know I was knocking.
Yeah, that's so true, and that's one of those things where the harder you work in the military, the harder it is to work when you get out because you're learning skills that really serve just kind of a one or two niche things. And a lot of guys I know, even the smartest dudes I know in my whole career in their job, they're left with just still doing that, but as a civilian when they get out. We're like, well, I know this and that's all I really know, so I'm just going to be a contractor when I leave.
Yeah. It is a problem, and it's comfortable. You just stay on go work for BAE. Like, oh, we lost the contract, and now whatever L3 has the contract. Okay, you just get a new shirt and a new benefits package, and you just keep on trucking. But if you do go knock on those other corporate doors, it is funny. Do you recall a few years back, Google put out a thing like, you put your MOS in, this will show you all the jobs that are related to your MOS. Like, excuse me, how? No, there's no way that works for most MOSs unless your MOS is like light wheel mechanic. It ain't gonna happen. So like counterintelligence, that's my MOS was. I got things like cook. Like how in the world does your robot think cook is what I'm qualified to do? And how can there only be two jobs in the region? Yeah, it is tough you're right. If you do your job well and you focus on that mission, there is a penalty there.
That's true. And I was a Black Beret expeditionary combat guy. And there's no jobs for that. Like, there's no jobs like, hey, we need you to go drive sneaky boats and shoot stuff. It doesn't exist.
Yeah. But your skills do translate. Actually, I want to go back. I say spy because that's how they see us, right? Like if I go out into villages and I'm finding things out and I'm trying to, improve the commander's ability to win, if they get their hands on me, what they're going to call me. They're going to call me a spy. So I just stick with that. But I also understand like what you're saying, like you don't want to necessarily call yourself that because it is problematic. What do you say that you did in the military? How do you describe it?
I usually just do that one thing. I just say sneaky stuff. Because I think that just sums everything up. It lets you know I'm probably still on a 75-year non-disclosure agreement. Let's talk about something else. I think it helps to illustrate everything and let you know there's not a whole lot I can talk about.
Yeah. I usually say I can talk about just about everything. And if you get into classified territory, I wouldn't talk about it anyhow, But so much of my stuff was just barely classified. It was classified because of the moment and the intention. But, once you leave that theater, and that commander's not there and you're not, it's all of a sudden like it's not very classified at all. I can change names and stuff, and all of a sudden you have no idea who I'm talking to or what I'm talking about. Is that does that make you uncomfortable though when you talk about that? Because you're right, 75-year NDAs, and we're supposed to be quiet professionals, but you also have to tell your story.
That's true. And I think there's a whole lot of stuff you can talk about, but you can. I won't speak for you, but I can feel it in my body when I start getting close to that line of what you can and can't talk about. I really can.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're totally right. There's this switch that goes off, and you're like, "Ooh, I'm in the gray zone," and you're not the arbiter of what is or isn't right. Someone else gets to decide for you,
Right.
and you can find yourself in a lot of trouble because you overestimated what isn't classified. Because the default is to classified stuff, classifies things.
Yeah, and that's ultimately whether or not you did a great job is going to be up to a federal judge at some point.
Right. And it doesn't matter what people do with their home servers and top secret emails and everything. It matters what you have to deal with in real life. And if you don't have that kind of political influence, you sure as heck are going to have some real problems.
Yeah.
The other thing is a lot of the things that I talk about are very tactical, and they're not specific about a mission. So it's not classified in terms of like the fact that we use incentives to get a source to do something, or the fact that, these are common known things. It's what incentive, what day, what person, what piece of information, all of those things would be classified. So it makes my peers in the counter intel side, especially like we're in this little group on Facebook, and they get nervous about that kind of stuff when I talk about things. But a lot of this stuff is I always say, like, watch Mr. Brooks, that movie with Kevin Costner. They do vehicle meets and source operations, so you can learn a lot about this stuff, and it's right there. It's in a movie,
It's true. And I think if you want to see how that stuff really works, and for your audience, if you weren't a spy, you didn't do that kind of stuff, I think that movie Syriana is the most accurate depiction of Middle East intelligence that I've ever seen. And
why?
Just the way that you have a high and low level intelligence stuff, and it's not always the spy that's getting information. It's the spy that talks to the congressman that says, hey, you need to get this information out of this guy, and you've got 15 minutes to do it because his security rotates at 10:45 every evening, and you can go knock on the door, he'll let you in. It really happens at weird levels. There's extremely high level people doing really low level jobs, like putting a bomb on a car or something like that. And there's really low level people that are tasked to do really high level stuff just because they can't be facially recognized by another person in the room. It's just a strange, unusual thing where there's allegiances. There's always going to be allegiances you don't know about. And that whole dynamic was strange. And I think that when you're talking about incentives and stuff, the best performing incentive I've ever seen work in the Middle East was candy bars, because a lot of intelligence came from kids out there who were visiting a tent somewhere, getting a vaccine, learning how to brush their teeth, or there's a map on the wall and maybe a picture of a gun or a rocket. And he points up and says, oh, Jimmy's dad has a bunch of those in his basement. And that's where a lot of intelligence came from.
It's so true. We've got a short that I put up recently, and it's my buddy John and I. We both deployed to Bosnia. We were in the same battalion, same company, same everything, but we went to different spots. And we're in Bosnia early on. This is 96. And both of us had, independent of knowing this, that took us 30 years to figure this out. But they went out one day, and it was, the water supply was bad. Everything was messed up because it's war torn and everything's not what it normally is. And so it turned out that Maalox was something they couldn't get in the stores because they weren't, the normalcy factors were too low. Normalcy factors for the audience is like, can they get bananas? Can they get aspirin? And these are normalcy factors. So they couldn't get Maalox. And so he's like, I got Maalox for days, I'll get you all the Maalox you need. And that opened up the doors. Like, these guys had a serious need. I mean, you imagine trying to get your life restarted and you're just, you got GI anger, gastrointestinal anger issues going on inside of you,
Yeah.
What a relief. And then we did the same thing with sunscreen. These guys were all rebuilding their homes, and they were just getting hammered by the sun. And they're like, if we just had some sunscreen. And you're like, you serious? Sunscreen? Sure.
Yeah.
This is the Army. We got a guy with the Connex full. He's begging people to take it. So come on, let's go. And that opened the door for us to meet people that we might have met them either way. But this was the fastest path, it turned out, was something as simple as that. I mean, we gave away a lot of cigarettes and whiskey and Game Boys and all that stuff, but it was the real necessities that created that trust to open the door.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so cool. And there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that people don't see.
Yeah.
And it's just it's the small missions that are going on that are putting a gigantic, like a dot matrix photo together. But that giant photo is made up of those tiny little operations that give us what we call like an operational picture of what's going on.
It's hard to develop at least the human intelligence skills to reliably go into an unknown place and come back with something. Like in Bosnia, we were the first people to be there. I mean, okay, the UN had been there, but it was a bunch of Pakistani guys, and they were mostly just holding ground, right? They weren't operating outside the camp. So, and sure, we trained, to be able to go out and meet people and have conversations. But the reality is we largely didn't know what we were getting into, because our mission was part strategic, part tactical until we deployed. And then it was all tactical and all like unknown unknowns. And so we had to go experience it. And it's a tough road to figure out, like, if your team is allowed to go off the camp, if your leadership is good at mentoring you and everything else, now you have the chance to maybe develop into somebody who can collect. We take these skills and apply them in day-to-day life. And sometimes, my ability to control conversation, right? When I was a younger collector, I couldn't control my desire to find things out from my friends, my family. Like I would get into a conversation and find out that I was just wrenching, until I became more sophisticated in that collection. Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, I remember learning how to do some of that stuff. They called it a Jason Bourne school. And I remember learning that and thinking every area of my life is now going to benefit. And that stuff trickled in very overtly, I guess, is how I would describe it. It was very overt, but at the same time, I wanted to hone those skills. I wanted to get the reps in when the stakes weren't high. So when the stakes were high, it was kind of it became more automatic for me.
What does that look like though? Like in the day-to-day operation, how do you get those reps in, and what do they look like?
So let's just take elicitation, for example. Elicitation skills are basically, to sum it up, how to get information out of a person without asking questions, because questions are difficult. So let's say, and I'll be probably preaching to the choir, but let's say, Pete, I take you to a grocery store, and let's say we're standing in the produce section of a grocery store, and I say, Pete, you've got 2.5 minutes to figure out how much that woman makes over there, who's stocking the cauliflower, but you can't ask her how much she makes for a living. So the question is not possible. So we have to use statements to get information. And it makes people way more open to giving information out when you use statements. So if you just walked over there and said, hey, how much do you make for a living? You might still get the answer, but you're going to be put in a column on her little mental Excel sheet of weirdo or potentially socially awkward, and the relationship may not develop. But if you went over there and said, hey, congratulations, I just read online that you guys got bumped up to $17.50 an hour. That's fantastic. And then if you just say that and she turns around and goes, what? No, we only make $14.25. Now you have the income because she wanted to correct you. We triggered that need. And then you can say, oh, I'm so sorry. So sorry. I must have read the wrong article or something on LinkedIn. So just, I would say small things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. The craft of not asking for what you want, and then also being able to let the conversation go to where it needs to go, because you might find out instead of how much she makes a year or an hour or whatever it is, she may give you something even better. And so You can't be so fixated on that one piece of information that you close all the doors to the other thing. Like, it's all about, when I try to explain, it's about trust and openness. And you have to know that you can ride on this wild pony and guide it to where it needs to go, and realize this is all I needed right here. Let's not work this anymore. Done. I've got my piece of gold. I've got that piece of trust or whatever it is. So you're right. And the elicitation thing, and I know you'll get this. So this is more for the audience, but I want to talk about this. Is we think about questions in open and closed, and that's a decent way to do it. But basic interrogatives are closed questions. It's so when you remove that interrogative from the first part of the question. So like if I was to say, what's your opinion on that? Okay, that's a pretty good question. But if I just said, opinions, and then you're going to be like, oh, okay, yeah. And you're going to think deeper than that, And so, one of my favorite questions was to ask Shunu Rayak in Arabic, what is your opinion about this? And you ask someone who hasn't been asked their opinion on something, someone from America who they're like, man, I revere who you guys are and what you're doing. They're going to dig deep and give you a lot. And then once they give that stuff to you, part of the elicitation is just don't waste it. Listen for what they're saying and find those areas to pull that lever and get to work in that one little aspect.
Yeah, so true. And that's one, I mean, you could even use elicitation in that, where you would use a statement that's provocative. You would say something like, I bet you've got some really well-founded opinions on that.
Yeah.
So the I bet statement is kind of my go-to when it comes to elicitation.
Yeah. Yeah. Another question, and it's got the interrogative in it, but I think it's all right, is, what keeps you up at night? Because that's a heavy question. And that puts that person in their bed at night and they're like, oh, you know what, actually. And it's never what you think it's going to be. Right. What, because everybody has that. Everybody has something. And you're looking for these things that are just like automatic answer buttons where they can't help themselves. Like someone who's from Ohio State, like, you do ego down with those guys, kind of a weak program. You guys are kind of overhyped, and then they'll just vomit and they won't stop vomiting, and you can say, I'm going to do this to you, push the button, and they still are compelled to respond to these things.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. It's such a societal thing to where tribal defense and societal social responses are just pre-programmed into our automatic behaviors that we can't. It's really difficult to stop.
Yeah, the stopping part is great. So, just for the audience, one of the tricks that I would do, and Chase, hit the ball back and ask me or expand on this, but if I go to someone's office, I am going to take a moment to be aware of what's in their office, because there's going to be something in there that is so important that they will respond to it. And just from doing prep for you, the first thing I noticed was there's always a picture of your dog above your head, and I'm like, all right, so I can ask about this dog, and you're going to have an emotional response before you give me the answer, Yeah. What are some of the things that you do? Like, what do you look for that will find those levers that are just compelling to the point where the person doesn't even care if they when sometimes you're over talking and you're like, I'm over talking, but I don't care. I have to talk. Like, what are those things for you?
Anything that I think is what they are specific. What is in the space, a person's car, office, person, clothing they're wearing. What's in the space that looks like or has the appearance of being designed for you to see? So if I see somebody's, let's say some weirdo has a picture of a dog above his head in every video that he's in, you might say something like, I bet there's a really interesting story behind that photo. And that goes back to the I bet statement. So if I see somebody who's over the age of 25 still wearing a college graduation ring, you damn right they want to be asked about it. They want to talk about it. They want you to see those things.
Yeah.
So any part of somebody's environment or makeup that is there, that either they're very proud of or they would like to be seen as a certain type of person. What do you think? What do you typically look for?
Me, what do I look for? I'll look for a book, because a lot of time, because of the shows we've had so many authors, there's often a book that someone has written that I'll know. Either I've read it or I've met the author through the show. I find that to be just so sticky that we're off to the races and we're fast friends. It's a fast friend maker. And I don't even look anymore. Once I see that book, done. All the other work goes out, and I can really just focus on them. And I'm looking at I call it fence building. And so I'm like, wait, you were in the Army? I was in the Army, or you like the Dodgers? I like the Dodgers. You're trying to put these fence poles, and you're like, hey, we have the same kind of fence. Let's keep seeing if these things touch. And so I just start fence building with these guys and try to understand, like, hey, were you, you're an Afghan governor. Surely you were in the Muj. And then they're like, yeah, I was in the Mujahideen. I was a commander. Well, then done right there. I'm done. I'm going to just talk about that time so I can understand their hardship, their warrior spirit. I mean, dude, something like that, Chase, it's over.
Yeah, it's very true. And it's an automatic bond. It goes from, I'm not sure who this person is, to this person is a member of my tribe. Very quickly. So that those tribal affiliations are pre-programmed in our ancestors. And that's literally what kept us alive for the last 5 million years. And you can't LinkedIn course your way out of something like that. There's no like meditating your way out of the last 5 million years of what kept our ancestors alive.
Right.
So that's why that stuff is so powerful. It's built into our DNA. We're not even born with the ability to speak language, but we're born with all that tribal stuff. We're born with body language and nonverbal communication. That's why it's so reliable.
Nonverbal's huge too. And you don't got to be, this is the thing. And this is, you're welcome to disagree with this, but this is how I see nonverbal communication. You read the books, you understand who the authors are and how they use them and in the context they use them. And it's all different. It's all a puzzle. And so I'm looking just for trends. So if I see like the governor's hands are up above his heart when he's talking, I'm like, he's excited, maybe excited bad, maybe excited good, maybe he's putting on an act, but he's excited in some way. If his feet are off the ground, I'm like, oh man, this guy's really fired up now. He's like, because you'll see, I mean, I've seen people run in place, sitting down, where they're just like so excited and all four limbs are moving. And I'm like, this is a good, and I always say I listen for things, not to the person. I'm absolutely hearing what they're saying, but I'm listening for these buttons and levers and knobs and dials. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I tend to agree with you. And if you're looking at nonverbal behavior at all, I'll give you like the crash course masterclass that I can sum up in 60 seconds.
All right.
The body is either opening or closing. And closing is typically not always, but it suggests that there's negativity going on. Stress, fear, something like that closes our bodies up. And when the body opens up, or we have hands out in the air, hands out to our sides, somebody's opening, that's typically elation or excitement. So if you just want to look for body language today, if you want to try this on today, is it opening or closing? And what was it before? Because if you're looking at any nonverbal behavior and you want to get good at spotting it, you're in the business of change detection, not just seeing the little stupid snippets they put on LinkedIn where like, oh, someone puts their hand on their leg, it means they want a pay raise or something like that. That's not right, because they're not teaching you to look for the movement. They're showing you a still image and explaining what it means, which is really bad because it makes your brain look for the stillness instead of the change. Because if I can see a change in behavior, I can immediately identify the context or words that I just said that caused the behavior. So if I'm in sales and the moment I start talking about terms of use or how long this contract's going to be, and I see somebody's hands go back or their fingers close up, their legs go underneath the chair, that's a noteworthy data point there.
I love it, man. Yeah, this is great. And those of us that study this stuff, I think we all know that we're very fallible. Like you can absolutely put the wrong thing on somebody. And I never hear anybody who I respect in terms of their body language ability. They never talk about the fact that you're in a two or multi-person conversation when you're reading this person. So you're reading a fraction of the conversation. And I want to say this before I lose this thought. Like if you see me do this, you know that my legs moved, even if there's a table between us, and you're just clocking that. That's data, and may not mean anything yet. So when I have that conversation, I likely am with the platoon of dudes with guns, and so like I got to understand, like this person might be nervous because it turns out, like it can be scary to have a bunch of military guys show up.
Yeah.
When you're going and maybe asking for a raise, maybe that person is nervous because their job and their mind is on the line, and as a boss, you're like, I got to get this person calmed down. And maybe they're already calm. But I would say as a person who elicits information, if I can repeat the pattern, then it's a lot more true for me. So like if I see this person, what I make to be nervous or whatever it is, I'm going to stop, back up, calm them down as much as I can and see if they go back to that nervous spot when we enter that topic again. because I'm in control of the conversation. I'm weaving it around and hopefully doing it imperceptibly. But if I find them back in that nervous zone, now I've got two vectors of nervousness to this topic. And that
Right.
tells me that the work is not in the topic, it's around the topic. Let's get this person calmed down. Let's work on trust. Let's not, if I've got the ability to have another meeting, then we don't have to win that fight right now, because there's no point, because if I do it better and I develop trust, then it's over. And I wanted to give you an example of when you don't have a whole lot of time, but body language is an indicator where you do want to act quickly. So we're on patrol and our radios are talking to us and it's telling us, hey, Taliban's in the area. So we know this, right? And nobody else knows this. And so we see a farmer, he walks out towards us to greet us, and it's a patrol. And there's, 20 or so guys out there. And he's talking and he's talking and he's all in the language of the homeland that he's in. And we bring up the bad guys, the Taliban in the area, and he starts talking like this. And he covers his mouth the entire time he talks. And the commander who I was with couldn't see it because, it's not that he's bad at his job. He's focused on so many things. It could be, he's probably thinking about an ambush. Like, we know these guys are in the area. We've got to be, he's alert. And so he literally misses the guy with the hand talking to him, and I'm like, hey, Dave, or whatever his name's going to be in this case. He's got his hand in front of his mouth. If he knows, he probably can't say right now. So maybe we look around and take it off, the burden off, because we're going to see this guy again and again and again. And so is the Taliban. So we need to take the burden off of him so that he can survive, so that we can make friends, And so it was one of those things where that one little body language I might have been wrong on that, but it was an opportunity for us to back off the pressure, take it off of him, go look for the Taliban, do our job, and then be able to come back to that person and knowing that we had possibly reduced the threat and danger for that person. Because the moment we leave, the Taliban's still going to be there,
That's right. Yeah. And that's one of those instances where you could have that nonverbal betrayal when you ask them, are they in the area? Or you ask a question like, where should we look? And you see his behavior go, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
And you see him look a certain direction and then say, all right, let's send a helo over there to take a look.
Yeah, break the squad off, go that way. Yeah. The repeated pattern, what are your thoughts on that approach? I mean, when I bring them close to whatever it is, the item that I want to talk about, the Iranians or whatever it is, and they get nervous, and so I back out and see if I can approach from a different angle. Is that something that you do? And then are you coming, and it can be I'm using military settings because it's kind of sexy, but approaching it from a different vector and coming in for the same topic from a different angle, but I'm also combining the situation, the body language, a lot of things into this stew. And again, I don't presume that I am the world's greatest. I'm good at making stew, but I can make bad stew very easily if I allow myself to get into bad habits.
Yeah. I think anytime I've had to calm somebody down because a topic brought up some issue there, I typically don't revisit it for a minute, and I'll give them the expectation that I'm going to bring it back up in a minute. So I'll say that right then. So I'll change the topic, let them calm down. And then I'll just casually say, we're going to bring this up and I'll ask you about that in just a minute. It seemed like that was an issue for you. So that way they have some expectancy and they can gather themselves before it's coming.
I'm curious if this is all on the same kind of topic, and this is a little earlier what you would do in the conversation, but we often say things like establish rapport, and it becomes a checklist item. I have now officially established rapport. Check. Now I'm going to go on to trust building. But then it doesn't work like that. So right. when I say, hey, establish rapport, but what are the details? Let's get more than paper thin there. How do you know? How do you test for it? What are some things that you can do? We talked about some of the tools that we both use, but talk about rapport specifically.
I think if you have a limited amount of time, and I'm assuming that we're talking about a stranger, a limited amount of time to do something, your number one and first thing you should employ is focus. The focus comes first because that leads to everything else. Focus is the doorway to everything that follows. And focus is the fastest way to generate focus in a human being is with novelty. 2 million years ago, if your ancestors walking by the same stinking bush every day, all on the way back to the tribe, they walk by the same bush, and one day they're walking by the bush and a stick breaks behind it. So that's novelty. That's something that's new. We have a script. something doesn't meet our script or what we expect to happen, then we have focus. So focus comes fastest and easiest from something new or unexpected. And after focus, we need to level up some kind of connection or openness, and those
Mm.
two I would say are hand in hand. So, and then we do that with our body. My good friend Mark Bowden, who I'm on the behavior panel with on YouTube, talks about something called the truth plane, where your hands are at belly button height and they're held out with your palms exposed. Automatically signals to the animal brain in us that we're trustworthy, we're likable, and credible. And I would say as a tactic, I'll throw a quick tactic in here.
Sure.
The next time that you're in a conversation, right as it begins, especially with a stranger, right as you begin speaking to the other person, right as the dialogue starts, step to the side just a little bit. In the first 60 seconds of a conversation, we're most socially vulnerable. So within that 60 seconds, if you move, that person's likely to readjust their shoulders, even if it's just a millimeter or two. There's a small adjustment to move towards you. And that small adjustment starts a cascade effect of what I call behavioral entrainment. So
Mm.
over time, we're teaching their mind every time they do something, I will follow it, which eventually 30 minutes down the road is going to lead to every time they tell me to do something, I will make an agreement to do that. But those small little pieces of entrainment are very important. And one of the quickest ways to get rapport after we have focus and the person's a little bit more open to what we're doing is to make some kind of confession that they normally wouldn't hear. To confess, like, I was really nervous about this, or I remember I grew up with social anxiety, and I can still feel it, sitting in the back of my head right now. Just those small things to let other people know I'm a human, and the world's already full of the fakest people ever, like on Instagram
Oh
and
my gosh.
Facebook. It's
Yeah.
just fake. Everyone's fake. So I think especially today, it's really refreshing to see somebody who just speaks genuinely and is able to make a confession like that to a total stranger. And think about elicitation, that makes them more likely to
Oh yeah.
reciprocate as well. So now we're leveling up openness and increasing liking as well.
Yeah, I want to definitely amplify that. There is an element of ego up there. When you present a vulnerability, and the person now can kind of go into this more ego up role where they're like, oh well, here's how I got over social anxiety, and then all of a sudden they're talking, and then you're just nodding the conversation this way, that way. You're just you are now lightly in control. And I would say that when you are going for rapport, like that would be a big indicator. Like, okay, I threw some vulnerability out there. They started talking. We're pretty far down the rapport train. Maybe I go for one more rapport note and see like if I could, accomplish some other thing from them. Like maybe I do. Maybe I switch my body over this way and see if they follow or whatever it is. You start to stack these little indicators, and those are your tests for rapport. Any problem with anything I said there? Or do you think that's pretty good?
Absolutely agree. And those little tests are important, if the stakes are high, especially
Mhm.
so like reaching up and scratching your head, or adjusting your posture to sit up a little bit straighter and to see if they follow suit,
Yeah.
is a great way to check that stuff.
The power of questions in that case too. Like if you do feel like you're getting nervous, you've got to modulate your ability to like stay within yourself, putting the onus on them to answer a question or to give you their thoughts. It's a powerful way to get them again to continue to respond to the input that you're creating. I mean, I always talk about affect over effect. I can ask you 100 questions, but if I can't get you to emotionally respond in a way that's reliable, that makes sense to me, then that affect part is where the work is. It's not in how
Yeah.
many times you do something. It's what's that emotional response to stimuli.
Right. Yeah, absolutely agree. I think there's so much going on in the beginning of a conversation that uh, I think character plays so huge a role in this that I didn't realize it until a lot later. that I just did a training for the government not too long ago, and I held up a 3x5 card with a whole bunch of words on it. And I said, "This is the word for word script on how to use which was originally a hypnosis technique, but how to use a confusion statement in order to get a free coffee at Starbucks. Who wants it?" And of course, every hand in the room goes up. And I try to illustrate that by, if I give this card to somebody with social anxiety or somebody who feels some kind of deep imposter syndrome or something, it's not going to work.
Right.
So you could get the best scalpel on planet Earth. It doesn't make you a surgeon.
Yes.
You've got to get the internal skills. You have to get the internal social skills, because those are so much more important than the tactic stuff. Great leaders. Bill Clinton didn't have tactics. Well, he probably did later. But when he's growing up, that was a natural skill. Charles Manson didn't have tactics. That was an internal skill. And they were both equally able to make people do things they normally would not. And I think that's remarkable, because that in the absence of tactics, skill always works. But in the absence of skill, tactics don't always work.
There's two things I want to ask you about. Let me think about what I want to do. Okay, so let's do so tactics have to feed your big outcomes, right? And so if your tactics aren't in alignment with your strategic desire, then the best tactics in the world don't matter, because you're not advancing the ball. You're like, we're going to get into the end zone, and first thing we're going to do is grab a baseball bat. Like you're playing the wrong sport. So these tactics have to be in alignment with that. How do you, if you're going to go in for a meeting, you're going to pitch somebody or whatever that scenario is in business, how do you do that then? How do you understand the link between your strategic goal of getting the yes, getting the next meeting, and then what are the things that you need to step by step do in your tactical ground truth approach?
I think I'm just going to set out behavioral outcomes. So I'm going to think about the person that I'm talking to. What is the behavioral outcome and the physical outcome? Those are two different things I'm very specifically going to be thinking about. So on a behavioral outcome, I'm just going to say, let's say it's a business meeting. I want this guy to trust me. I want him to think I'm a really good person. I want him to think I'm a person he wants to do business with. And from an external perspective, I'd like for him to at least consider, or I'd like for there to be some kind of draft contract for us to work together in place within the next 24 hours. Maybe somebody's got to draft it up. But in the interim, as I'm planning the conversation, I think there's probably 6 things I'm really thinking about leveling up. And that is focus, openness, connection, vulnerability, and suggestibility, a person's level of suggestibility, and finally expectancy. And expectancy means I can predict. I'm tricking the brain. I hate to say tricking, but I'm making the brain believe that it knows and can predict an outcome, and I get to pick what it chooses. And it's like the news does to you, to us, to all of us. It says a woman killed after loud argument with her boyfriend. And our brain goes, oh, I bet I know what happened. I bet I know exactly what happened. Even though the argument was 9 years before the killing, it was still after. But it makes you feel clever. It gives you the feeling. It doesn't say that those two things are connected. It lets you be the one who's clever. And you say, oh, I should call the news. I've got this stuff. I can figure this out. But that's what you want to do. And when we create expectancy, that's what we're doing.
That expectancy, these tactics. Okay, so we can say this, and one of my favorite, we've got this short video, we talk about this, but this guy who's just got a brilliant life in the Marines and worked internationally and was raised in South America, riding donkeys when he was 6, working for his dad's mining, just this impossible upbringing. We were talking about partnering and how the military will say, first you must establish rapport. And so you're like, I have spent 20 minutes establishing rapport. Whether you have established rapport or not is immaterial, because you've satisfied the checklist, right? So saying all these things and looking for these cues, it doesn't mean that like you have to be natural when you do it. I always think like whatever the question is that I'm trying to answer for the commander, I've got to have it framed in my own words so that I'm as natural as I can be saying it. Because I'm going to shut up because I see you've ready to talk.
Yeah, no. I agree. And it's like, imagine if some guy who wasn't that good at it made you a checklist that, and I'm talking to the viewer here, made you a checklist that you have to follow to go on a date.
Yeah.
And all right, this is your first date checklist. Do not proceed to step 2 until you've reached the 18-minute mark and you have developed rapport.
Yeah.
Or any of these human interactions. Because if there was a way to checklistify human interactions, job interviews would be a cinch.
Right.
And if I would make a job interview checklist for people and I would sell it for $3 million. It doesn't exist.
Totally. Yeah.
And it's great for some things. Heart surgeons, brain surgeons, astronauts, pilots, those checklists are fabulous because that's a science and not an art.
Right.
So when we try to blend the two, this is not a science. So applying the checklist methodology is a little silly, and I've dealt with it my whole career.
One of those things that you need to access is when you ask someone a question and you see them, and this is a thing I always, there's a lot of them that I have, but this is one that's very easy anybody can do, is when you hear a person access their internal hard drive and they go, that's good. Like, what did you do to get to that point? Continue to get people to think, because now you're getting to a more deeper level of truth. They may not be lying to you, but they're not giving you anything in particular, just going across the top line, right? But when you get them to clock that hard drive, now you got them and they're accessing that brain. I would think that's part of that focus element. Is that right? Or where would you put that? And I'm just using that as an example. There's 2,500 of these things where like someone's like, oh, they're doing this. I have accomplished one of my goals in getting this person to give me better quality truth, or whatever those things are.
Yeah. I would say that's cognitive investment is what I would call that they're investing by actually thinking and processing to make sure they give you the right information. And during those time periods, that's one of those things when we see those things, we need to pay attention to when does that happen? What is the subject matter around? How did I ask the question? Did I do it differently? Did I put my hand on my chest to make me look more sincere as I was saying it? And then as we're listening to them, take note of a person's adjectives and pronouns that they use. And I don't mean like sex pronouns. I mean, if somebody's talking about themselves all the time, that's how if I'm a car salesman, I'm going to say this is the benefits to you. If they're talking about our company, we did this, they do all of this stuff. So it's all team membership pronouns. Benefit of the car is going to be for your family. It's a team. And when we say adjectives, if they describe, let's say I'm talking to a woman, for instance, she describes this narcissistic ex-husband and uses the word disgusting and awful. Guess what words I'm going to memorize to start talking about the consequences of not doing what I'm, might ask her to do, or maybe my competition, I'll describe using those words. Who knows? But those are important for you to use to describe negative consequences. But if she talks about a vacation she went on, like some Caribbean cruise, and she says brilliant, amazing, and awesome, that's how we're going to describe, like, I think it would be brilliant for us to work together. We've got an awesome team here, and I think you're going to have an amazing time once we all connect. So I'm going to feed all of those same adjectives back to that person in a positive light.
Yeah, that's great. And when a woman scorned is talking about, the narcissist in their life, it's such a powerful tool. Like, they're screaming at you, like, please understand this pain that's been caused to me. And you're absolutely if you can take that and use that to your advantage in a way that's respectful and everything else, obviously, you're so far ahead on that person, because you're going to be able to identify with them so much easier because you have that narcissist thing down, and you don't want to. The young collector in me would use that to my advantage like a hammer, but the seasoned guy shapes it and it's wood, and it becomes beautiful because I'm not exploiting their weakness. I'm enhancing who they are to get us to accomplish this thing together in a trust-based way. So there's definitely an elegance to these things. It's not just, aha, a vulnerability, let me now exploit it with my crowbar, you know.
Yeah, and that's tempting. I think even the most seasoned human intelligence people, psychology operations, Army psyops guys that I've trained have a tendency to do that.
Yeah.
Because it's so tempting. It works sometimes. And that's the reason it gets tempting, because wow, that guy really opened up and I got so much information. A week later, he hates me, won't return my calls, and doing all kinds of making nasty reviews on Google or whatever.
Yeah.
And but it's a dopamine reward for sure.
I want to transition to talk about your book, but first, let me just talk to the audience for a second here. If you're watching on Facebook, it'd be great. If you watch on YouTube, hit that subscription button and then that reminder bell. That helps us to continue to monetize the show. If you want to do that and just watch on Facebook, you can always go to breakitdownshow.com, hit the PayPal button, put a little bit of money in there. It's sort of like my version of Patreon, except for we don't need Patreon. I need you and your support, and you're working directly with me. We don't got to pay Patreon to do that. So that's a great way to support the show. You can always get shirts and everything else there. I want to talk about your latest book, Chase. It's called The 6-Minute X-Ray Rapid Behavior Profiling. And we've talked a lot of these things already, but let's get specifically into this book. And everybody should go to Amazon to get that book. There's a link right there. If you're on the podcast side, look in the show notes, you'll see the link there as well. What is the 6-minute X-ray? I mean, that's fast. That's super fast. That's like your Starbucks free coffee card. 6 minutes is
right.
It's moving.
So I've probably 30,000 hours on the behavioral profiling side and reading people's side of this. And I've noticed a giant trend over time where you can rapidly get just these vital pieces of data out of a human very quickly. And I promise you, if you get the book or you take the course, once you read this book, you'll see 6 minutes is a worst case scenario. So most of the time you can get this within the first minute and a half. And it's a way to build a detailed behavioral profile from their social needs, insecurities, fears, their decision motivators, what they don't like, what they like, the hidden secret objections, the secret disagreements they have while you're talking to them. And what I noticed coming out of the military and getting into sales guys had the same problems interrogators have. We wait till we get to the end when I'm going to ask somebody to confess. They wait to the end of a sale to ask if they want to buy, and then they're like, "No, I don't think this is for me," or they don't get it. But they don't know that they missed 155 indicators that would have been very helpful. And say, "Oh, I noticed, the guy's fingers closed when I talked about, whatever, how to change the tires," and that's a point I need to bring up. But we wait till the end, so we're interrogation, sales, and a lot of our human interactions, we're succeeding on accident. And I wanted to create a system to help people succeed on purpose, because when we succeed, it's because we might have accidentally addressed those issues that they were unconsciously about, or we accidentally used the right pronouns, accidentally, used the right language for that person needed to hear. So that's what the 6MX book really does.
Yeah, that's cool. The one of the things about the work that we do is it's very easy to make mistakes and not realize it, because this is a very ego-driven business. I'm trying to control a conversation. I'm doing all these things. I have these things, and you can lose sight of it where you're feeding your ego too much. I mean, when I really got good is when I realized I was unimportant in this equation. I was there. I could have been anywhere. I am not important. My job is to get the commander what the commander needs, get that governor what they need, and try to balance the different realities. And so I realized that underneath that were these things like trust that I had to focus. Because if I didn't have trust, there was no getting to the sale. You had to win trust. That's where the work was. And identifying where that work is the essential thing, whether it's your work specifically to become more elegant and just better at your work, or if it's getting that person through a series of events or conversations or physical responses. So you're like, okay, I've tested these hypotheses in this conversation. I'm confident now that we're just going to walk straight into this thing because we do have trust. We do have rapport. I know what makes them nervous. I've dealt with these objections before I even brought them up. And so we're just going to walk this thing into the sale, and then you're a lot more. You've done the work where it's at, not just skipped over steps.
It's so true. Yeah, yeah, and it's a much better feeling to do that. So I think when people want to skip over steps, that's the same approach that we accidentally take with diet or with exercise or any new thing that we need to do with our life. I'm standing in front of a staircase of, let's say, 10 stairs, and I'm thinking, what's the way I can hack my way to the top of this thing? And the front stair is right there, an inch in front of your foot.
Yeah.
And we're like, no, that's not for me. I need to go to the top first. I don't
Yeah.
need to step on this thing.
Yeah.
It's like that with so many things.
It's so true. One of the things that I heard, and because the tells go in the other direction too. So there I am trying to collect things. I'm in a foreign place. We got a bunch of Army guys around me. And whenever I heard the Army person, I'm not picking on the Army, but they can take it. When I heard that young lieutenant say, "My commander wants you to," and I'm like, stop everything. No, he doesn't. No, your commander does not matter right now. He's not here. It's not the mission. The moment they said that, Chase, they were so desperate to solve this thing. I watched this lieutenant he was advising a general, and I'm watching the general, right? And he's got everything neatly laid out on his desk. He's clearly got a lot of work to do, and he's being very patient. He looks like a dad talking to a little kid. The lieutenant's just fired up, and he's trying to accomplish, objective A, B, and C in this meeting. And the commander had told me, "Hey, go see what's going on with this. Like, see if you can figure anything out." And so my job really is just to observe. And I watched that general shuffle papers around, like mindlessly, like aggravated, like I have a lot of work to do. I'm moving things around. Yes. And the other guy's talking about a parade and weapon qualifications, all this other stuff. And so I was able to say, "Hey, LT, did you see how aggravated that general was and how he had all this work on his desk? And did you even ask him if he had time to chat right now? Like, you just came in unannounced, took over his office for an hour, and it's absolutely like the work was all behind that before you walked in the door, like you can't do these things." And because he was fixated on the commander's need, he missed all of the cues. It was plainly obvious that this guy was not having a good time. He was tolerating this young kid.
Yeah.
And that's not what you want as a partner.
Not at all. And that's why I've seen very, very few people that have stars on their shoulder that are not in composure, fully composed all the time, or just damn near all the time.
Yeah.
And you don't get to that level. They don't make mistakes very often in picking those guys. And I worked under a guy named Brad Cooper growing up. He was the first skipper of my first ship. I was a guided missile destroyer. And he is now a 2-star admiral, probably the best leader I've ever met in my life. And he's a natural leader. I think that composure is the number one thing that makes people start following another human being. And I think if we're looking at it like a pendulum, we've got composure in the middle here, and we have posturing on one side. We have collapsing on the other side. We've got the little pendulum. I think I might have said pyramid. The pendulum in the middle is composure. But when you have somebody who's collapsing their whole life, and then they finally get into a position of power, they get threatened, something bad happens, the answer to way over here on one side of the spectrum looks like the opposite side. Yeah. So we have collapsers that say, "Okay, I can't do this anymore. I need to go way to the other side," which is posturing. So we see people that vacillate back and forth between these, not understanding that composure is right there in the middle. And Cesar Millan said it best. The best leadership book I've ever read in my life was written by Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer.
Yeah.
And he said, "Humans are the only creature on planet Earth that will follow an unstable leader." And that shook me. Yeah. That stability is the number one trait in the animal kingdom. So when our little emotional brain inside the middle of our head says we need to follow that person, I think stability is one of the first things that it looks for.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's powerful. Cesar Millan, everybody, the dog whisperer, coming in with some great leadership tips.
Yeah.
The desire to follow somebody who's stable. Yeah, the composure thing is great too, because when you've been comfortable with adversity and uncertainty, especially like military guys, you can sit there and you're like, yeah, and I've certainly had worse. No one's shooting at me right now. Pandemic comes along. Well,
Right.
I've been hit by a tank, so I'll let
Yeah.
you know when I get scared.
Yeah.
It's like these different things, and that experience, that wisdom, is something that's laudable and followable if the person leverages it well. And you think about, in this case, an Iraqi general, an American lieutenant. That Iraqi general didn't get to that place because they're not a survivor. They got there because they do know how to politically survive in a very dangerous place where, politics is bombs and bullets being shot at you. It's like, this person is savvy. And to miss that is such this is one of the things I talk about a lot is your checklist for the airplane, right? We can go through and we've taken all of the most likely problems and we've dealt with it. We put our hands on it, we looked at it, we twisted a knob, everything. But when it comes to working with an interpreter or breaking down a person before you pitch them on some idea or whatever it is, we don't have that smart card. We don't have the ability to take an NCO and say, get this person's rapport building skills up to the standard. We don't know what the standard is. We just make it up. And so this is what sounds like what your book does, is that it helps systematize this stuff. And again, it's delicate and it's individual, and you have to go out and do these things and practice it. Where's the best place for someone to practice these skills in general so that they're getting the reps? Because you and I both know it's not 10 or 20 times of practicing this. And the other thing is, it's all born on the back of your mistakes.
Yeah, which is great, a great way to put it. And I think where I encourage most people, even intelligence dudes, to go do this stuff is watch Judge Judy, watch Shark Tank, watch the Catfish show on MTV. Watch some of these things and see how much you can spot. See if you can spot their fingers curling in or their shoulders moving up, or these little nonverbal behaviors. And then the really cool thing that came out of this pandemic is these Zoom calls. If you want to take notes of what you need to look for in a person's face and their words and all this other stuff, I could have a Post-it note right next to your face with all of my notes on it that I need to train myself on, and you'll never know. I can't do that in real life. So that at least gives us a chance to get reps in real life of what I need to be looking for step by step. Here's the 8 things I'm looking for on the human face. We're sitting on Zoom. I'm on a boring ass business call or something. I might as well get some training out of it.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Detect the pattern, test the pattern, use the pattern, see if it works. Okay, good. You tested it. You validated it. Yeah, no, absolutely. And then can you do that imperceptibly? I always tell everybody, when you see me collecting, it looks like I'm having a great time, a great conversation, because I am. That's exactly what I'm doing. But the entire time, my brain is clocking. My little 586 head, it's like, it's just going, and all these things are happening. So you'll never know that I'm working. And that's why I'm good, because I know how to do that now. I wasn't at first. At first it was, you maybe could tell, but the other person on the other end I'm talking to for sure could feel it, that I was levering too hard and overworking the problems,
Yeah. And I think there's a point where that stuff just seeps into who you are, because it becomes so ingrained. We're seeing positive results so much. There's a tiny little thing the size of a pea in our brain called the nucleus accumbens. And that thing just kind of memorizes, oh, that felt good. I'm going to do that again. I'm going to do that again.
Yeah.
And I think it becomes ingrained in who we are. When you're talking about building these fence posts, before we started recording today, I was like, dude, is that a Martin guitar back there?
Yeah.
And I meant that. I have the identical guitar right over here. But it wasn't a technique. It was genuine.
Yeah.
And I think the more that you can get these things into your personality, the better off you're going to be. And I think like an example of composure would be Andy Griffith to me. And we say we're the sum of who we spend time with. That means on TV. That means the news that we watch and all that too. You're better off watching 3 seasons of Andy Griffith than reading the newest 10 business books or leadership books coming out on LinkedIn. And I guarantee it. I'm a brainwashing expert. And I'm telling you, that's the best way to program that into your subconscious for sure.
One last thing I want to bring up, and then I'll let you close it out with your final thoughts. But the equation, when we try to balance it, we should always spend more time on our side of it because we are our biggest problem. If we can reduce our errors, increase our elegance, focus on trust, all of these things, then the outcome on the other end is a lot easier to accomplish. It's way easier to work on your end of the equation than to solve their problem. And I'm not talking in terms of sales, but just that is invariably been true. Military, jobs, bosses, like I have got to be the answer to my own problem.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think the way that we do that, or the best way that you can do this at home, is a daily report card. How did I do? Let's pick 10 or 15 things to rate yourself on. Did I make my bed? Did I brush my teeth? Whatever it is, whatever you think you need to level up. Did I do it at the end of the day? Yes or no checkbox. That's it. You can type up a little thing, send it to Office Depot, have a little notepad made out of them, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
But awareness of whether or not yes or no you're doing it is more powerful than making 1,000 affirmation statements. I'm going to do this tomorrow. I'm going to do this. No, you don't need to. Just be aware every day and bring that more and more into your consciousness. Your brain will do the rest of the work. Guaranteed. Your brain's going to do most of the work. So that awareness is more of a steering wheel than anything else for that stuff.
I love it. It's such a great conversation. I love talking to folks who get the behavioral side of things and the body language side of things. It's not mystical. It's hard work. It's elegance. It's experience. It's those reps. It's all of those things. Everybody should get the 6-minute X-ray rapid behavior profiling. Chase has written that. You can go to chasehughes.com, and I'll put that. There we go. I got the link to go. Chasehughes.com. You can get all the information there. There's courses. There's books. There's everything you need. Anything in closing, Chase?
I'm glad to be here, man. Thanks for having me on. It's really good to talk to somebody who's in the field, and we don't people like you and I, we don't get a chance to.
Not nearly enough.
Very much.
Yeah. And I love that. I bet that's great. I love that thing. I'm going to use that. All right, stand by 1 second.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly.